Hey guys, Christian from Showstopper Films back here again today with another budget tips and techniques video for filmmakers. But before we get into that, be sure to check out all of our social media sites, our Facebook, Twitter, and our very own website. All links down in the description for you guys to go check out. And also, if at any point during the video, if you decide you like it, be sure to smash that like button. And also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification for future uploads like this, as well as some tech reviews and our very own short films. So anyways, guys, today we're going to be talking about lighting your scenes for cheap. One more thing before we jump in. Remember that this is a tutorial for filmmakers just starting out and not a professional guide to cinematography. So anyways, let's get into it. Alrighty, so which lights should you use or invest in? Well, this really depends on the scene and the type of light that it calls for. But if you're looking at just starting out and you need something really cheap, just hop down to your local hardware store and pick up some clamp lights. They are extremely useful, extremely versatile, and you can swap out bulbs to your need. You can get tungsten bulb, daylight balanced bulbs, you can get colored bulbs, if you've ever watched Film Riot, you can get some just regular daylight bulbs and then just spray paint over them with some heat resistant paint and get your different colors of lighting that way. There's all sorts of different things you could do, and you'll end up likely building up your collection of lights over time. And it will just it's one of those things where you have to kind of build the kit as you go. For me, I started off with just 2 clamp lights and was able to make that work. Right now I've got 3 clamp lights, I've got a few light stands with some extra ports in those for some more bulbs. I've got a studio bulb actually lighting this right now. I've got a light wand up there, and I've got this little guy down here. So there's all sorts of different things you can invest in over time that will help you with lighting. I enjoy things like the light wand, and there's flex pads out there, LED panels that you can shape however you need, and they just really fit into a scene really well depending on how you use them. They work really well for hiding them in spaces that clamp lights or other types of lights really can't fit. If you're on a little bit of a higher budget, you can look at things like aperture lights. There's plenty of reviews out there for those. I would recommend going and look at those first. Always do your research before investing in something big like that. But I would just start simple. Like the clamp lights only cost me about 10 bucks a piece, and just a few extra bucks for some bulbs to pick up for it. I've gotten tungsten and daylight bulbs. And then there's also the light wand, which I have up here right now, lighting this little set up here. That has, I can adjust color temperature on it, I can adjust brightness. There's a super bright mode, it has the remote. I think that cost me all of 40 bucks. So you can probably invest in a couple of those and use those to light a scene really well. Works extremely great. I actually have my studio bulb up here in just a normal floor lamp right now that actually works really well for a studio setting. You can also use practical lighting when it comes to a scene. We'll kind of get more into that in the next section here. So these are pretty much all the types of lights that you'll really need when it comes to lighting. You can always look at more. There are several different options. You can get just regular LED panels. Just go look up some reviews. There's actually quite a few good ones that I've found. Just look up, like whatever type you want, LED light review, or, just lights for filmmaking. You can find all sorts of different types of lights and stuff that you guys can use. I'm mostly here today to teach you guys about the techniques and how to use lights and apply them to your scene to kind of get that feel that you want for it and just kind of understanding how light works. I just kind of wanted to touch up on this really quick just so you guys know there are budget ways to lighting your scenes. And next we'll actually be getting into some accessories for cheap that will help you out as well. So having certain things like light stands, umbrellas, diffusions, bounces, and negatives are all really extremely useful tools when it comes to shaping light and bending it to your will. I'm actually not really using any of them right now because it's just a brief studio setup and I'm not too worried about it. I still want this to look good, obviously, but I'm not looking to really get a cinematic feel out of it. But using things like this, you can, there's cheap solutions to all these, because obviously most of these are going to be, if you're looking for professional stuff, they're going to be expensive, a few $100s in some cases even, so it can kind of get scary. But you can find easy, cheap solutions like just the normal translucent shower curtain. You can act as a great diffusion. I've seen them for like 9 bucks maybe, so you'd be saving a lot there if you went that way. You can just use regular poster board, like white poster board, as a bounce, or you can use a black one as a negative. Any stand or item that stands up with poles on it. Like I've just got some normal cheap light stands right now. I just found a photography kit on Amazon for like $50. It came with 3 light stands, 3 bulbs, and 3 pieces to put the bulbs in. So actually it worked really nice. It was really cheap. You can find stuff like that all the time if you're keeping an eye out for it. But you can even just do cheap substitutes. If you have a clamp light, you can just pull up a chair and just throw the clamp light on that, and boom, you're good to go there. Stools work as well. You know, you just kind of get creative and create your own things. There are several DIY options out there, like where you can build your own light stands. I know Film Riot's got a good one. You can build one for like $15 out of PVC. Super quick and easy, and looks really nice in the end. It actually works really well. So just kind of be creative. There's no such thing in the film industry as too cheap, or as a film tool being too cheap. Everything and anything can be a tool to your process that can help you out in the end. So don't feel afraid to use some cheaper solutions like that. Don't feel that you have to max out a credit card just to be able to get good quality for a film. Alrighty, so now we're going to kind of get into a little more about understanding light and how it works within a scene. You'll often hear the terms warm and cool light when people talk about lighting. Warm light usually refers to bulbs that are closer to daylight balance, like I have lighting me right now. They kind of give off a more whitish tint because of the fact that they're getting all of the colors in the spectrum rather than just red, which is what a tungsten bulb does, which is going to be a cooler bulb and give off more of that orangish reddish tint. So kind of be aware of things like that. A lot of your household light bulbs are going to be tungsten. You can find daylight ones just fine, and they do tend to match the outside source. They are an attempt to replicate the light coming from outside. For the most part, they do quite well, and you can usually get it pretty good. Like you can tell right now, this kind of almost appears like daylight coming through a window at me right now, but maybe not quite as harsh. And that's another term that we got to get into: harsh and soft light. Harsh light refers to when the light is just kind of directly hitting your actor, like full beam of focus just directly on your subject, and you can see all of those little nitty-gritty details on their face. So if you were to like get closer to my face right now, you'd be able to see like every individual hair, every little pore, and every little imperfection of my face. So you get like a lot of detail in there. Soft light refers to lighting that's more diffused and scattered, and it kind of creates this softer image. It creates a more smooth surface. So like my face wouldn't be as rough and everything. It wouldn't be as rough and rough. It would just kind of appear smooth, and everything would kind of flow together and kind of gives a more romantic feel. Usually used in romances and comedies a lot. You'll see harsh light used in action and horror films and stuff like that. It all conveys a different tone. So kind of experiment with it a little bit and see how it affects you and see how it affects others, and just kind of pay attention to the psychology behind it. You don't need to like completely analyze it. Just kind of, you know, look at it and be like, is this the feel that I want for this scene, or should I swap it up and try going soft instead of harsh? You know, certain things like that. And in a moment here, I'll get into talking about how to create the soft and harsh light through various means using the tools that we mentioned before. And really quickly, going back to color temperature with bulbs, mixing different temperatures can be a bit of a pain. Right now, I actually kind of am mixing them to an extent. I have my daylight bulb up here, and then I've got my light wand up here set to an almost more tungsten feel. It's a little bit more orange, as you can tell. And I am doing that for a reason, because this is not lighting me. This is not lighting the main subject. The daylight is doing that. I'm having this light my background set up here. So it kind of gives a bit of a different feel. It kind of gives it a bit of a warmer feel to it, and more homey, you know, kind of makes it feel more like you're inside, like you're indoors. And it's kind of one of those things where I'm doing that on purpose because it works well, since it's not lighting me. As soon as I have it light me and I mix the lights together, it kind of starts looking gross and weird, and it just doesn't feel right at all. There are certain applications where this can work. Say you're inside of a building that has the ceiling lights on and they're next to an open window. At that point, then it would work. But in most cases, it just kind of feels unnatural, and I would try to avoid it as best I can. Just throwing in lights for the sake of adding in light to your scene is not always the best idea. Pay attention to how the light affects your scene, including colors. And obviously you can use different colors to affect the mood of a film too. You can use a more bluish tint to kind of give a moonlit feel, kind of a darker or colder feeling. Obviously using reds and oranges gives you that warmer, more homey feeling. And then daylight, pretty simple, just makes it seem like you're in daylight and it's just kind of a normal day. So be aware of things like that. Color is a huge thing when it comes to light, and you'll see that being focused on a lot by cinematographers. That's sometimes their biggest concern, depending on who you're working with. I myself like to look at it a lot depending on what the scene is. So if I'm in like this dark, or not really dark, but like kind of dusty, almost run down apartment, I'm going to be throwing in some redder light. Actually, if you look in Standalone during the scene when David is in his room, you notice that it's kind of got this dark and dank feeling to it. I did add some more cool temperatures into that, but then I also introduced this light wand at the same temperature it's at right now in the window to kind of help give it that kind of out of balance feeling. So there are, like I said, cases where it does work. Just be aware of it. Be aware of how it affects your scene and how it affects your audience's emotion. Because believe it or not, lighting actually does affect emotion a lot more than a lot of people think, and it is something that should definitely always be taken into consideration. Alrighty, so now we're going to be exploring a couple of different techniques for lighting. I'm just going to start with the basic ones. Like I mentioned earlier during the film accessories, you've got your diffusions, bounces, umbrellas, light stands, negatives, and all that. So we're going to kind of go through those and what those do really quickly first, and then we'll get into some basic lighting setups. So diffusion, this is a method that creates the soft light that I mentioned earlier as well. By placing a translucent object in front of your light source. You can place it at different intervals to create different effects. You just want to use the diffusion to put it in front of the light source. It will scatter the light a lot more rather than having it being just like this focused beam like it is right now for me. Like this is technically a harsh light. You can see all these shadows and whatnot. If it were to be a soft light, these shadows would either be a lot smoother or just would not be there at all. So keep in mind things like that. You can achieve a soft light as well with a bounce if you don't necessarily have enough room to set up a diffusion, or you just feel it's not the right fit, because they kind of can create two different feels. You can use a bounce, like I mentioned earlier, describing like a white poster board or something. You just point your light directly at that object away from your subject. You usually, so if I'm right here, my light's over there, I would have my light pointing away from me at a bounce behind it, and then that bounce would be sending the light back at me. Then it would become scattered and diffused, and it would just create this nice smooth lighting. But like I said, it can create different feels depending on how it's utilized. So this is one of those cases again where just go experiment with it, find out what works for you, try moving the bounce and the diffusions away and closer to your light, kind of screw with it a little bit more and figure out how that setup is going to work for you. And also, if you don't have a diffusion or you don't have a bounce, a wall will work just fine. If you have like a white wall or any kind of bright object, depending on the color of it, that will affect the color being bounced back, obviously. But if you just have like a plain white object, say you have just a white shirt and you have nothing else, you can just hang that white shirt up on a wall real quick, point a light at it, and bounce it off, and you've got a bounce light. And so next up on the list, we have negatives. Negatives are used, like I mentioned earlier, you can just get a black poster board and it'll work for that. So anything dark, basically to subtract light from your scene. If you get too much light overflow, it's really just, it's a way to shape your light a lot more and get it more into the detailed aspects. So if you use a black bounce, say if I were to throw that right over here, whereas my light is coming from over there, if I have it over here, it'll be able to stop some of the light that's hitting this side of my face. So it won't reflect as much. There will be less light actually hitting me. It'll kind of dumb it down a little bit. Or say if I threw a very powerful light source over here and it's hitting this side of my face and I don't want it hitting that much, I can kind of throw a little bit of that negative around it to kind of tone it down a little bit and not have as much of the light come out. Or even turning it to the side and then kind of throwing the bounce slightly in between me and the light, so some of the light's hitting me but not quite all of it. There's several different things you can do with it to mess with it. So just kind of, once again, practice, use these things, use these tools, these techniques, experiment with them, find out your style and what works the best for you. That's really like the best advice I can give in any of these budget tips and techniques videos, is just experiment, take what I give you, experiment with it, and maybe even find some other sources online that can help you as well and give you some more ideas to experiment around with, because it's one of those things where you have to explore as many possibilities as you can, develop your own style, and find out the things that work for your needs. Alrighty, so the most basic lighting setup that you're going to see in just about every film, or at least any professionally trained, or not necessarily professionally, but any educated film where they have learned and taken the time to learn lighting, the most basic one you're going to see is the 3-point lighting setup. And to put it simply, you're going to have a key light, which is going to be your main light on a subject, like what I have right now over here. This would be my key light. And then to kind of balance that out, you're going to have either a second light source off to the other side coming in that's going to be more diffuse and soft to kind of help fill in some of these shadows over here so it's not so harsh. Or you can just use a bounce and have the light coming off there, or even just throwing a bounce right here would help put more light onto this side of my face so it's not just completely shadowy and it creates less contrast. And then you're also usually going to have some kind of backlight or some kind of light to light the background like I have up here. This would be my third light right here because I have it lighting up this stuff behind me, or I could have it lighting the back of me, creating a backlight or a silhouette, and I'll get to that more in a minute. I do have this little guy right here, but I don't have it pointing at my face because you can see it's a really harsh source and just kind of awkward to use. So I'm just using it to help fill in some more of this background light here and kind of casting this little beam here. So it's kind of acting more like a backlight than an actual light for me. And there are several other setups within the industry that you can use, such as side lighting, Rembrandt, edge, rim, front, and backlighting, all of which you just saw on screen here. I just gave you examples of. But and most of the times you're going to be combining all of these different things together to create different lighting setups and things that match for you. So I'll just kind of run through some of these because most of these are pretty self-explanatory on how they're going to work. Like side lights, obviously you're going to be lighting the side of my face pretty much perpendicular to me. Front lighting, just pretty much head-on. Back lighting from behind me, pointing at me. And then there's also the 45-degree lights as well, like I have up here. But for some of the other ones, you get like the edge lighting, which is usually that's going to be from the rear 45 degrees pointing at you, and it's going to kind of light the one side of your face a little bit, and then the rest of it's going to be kind of almost covered in shadow. So there's an example of that on screen here. Then you get Rembrandt lighting, which is famously known because of the Renaissance painter, or maybe not Renaissance, but because of the painter Rembrandt. He used to use this technique a lot in his artwork, where there was just this little triangle left underneath the eye due to a light coming in from the side at just the right angle. So that's kind of the exact opposite of edge lighting for the most part. It's where it'd be up in the front at an angle rather than at the back at an angle. And then rim lighting, that's when you've got a light usually directly above your subject pointing down, or maybe slightly to the back and up pointing down at them, so that it'll kind of give like an almost halo effect on them. It'll kind of light their hair a little bit, and like I said, get that little extra glow up there. Or you can do the reverse of that, the reverse of rim lighting, where it's down below pointing up, and it kind of gives a ghost story type of feeling to it. Like when someone's holding a flashlight up to themselves and telling a ghost story, the light's all right here, and then it kind of wraps shadows around the rest of the face. So there's all sorts of different things you can mess with here. Just kind of throw your lights in different spots, make sure they make sense, obviously, make sure they fit the scene. But just kind of go crazy with them. Find out, the different types of techniques that you want. And if you want to throw some of these together, there's another technique known as cross lighting, which is when you have two subjects. This usually works for interrogations in some sort of cop TV show or movie, where you have the interrogation of one person facing another at a table, and your camera is perpendicular to them, giving them a profile shot. So usually with cross lighting, you're going to have a key light for both actors. So you're going to have your people here, you're going to have one light up here lighting this person over here from the front, and then you're going to have another light over here lighting this person from the front. But since you have the lights up here and they're acting as key lights for the other person, they also act as backlights for the opposite person. So if I've got this guy over here and this light up here lighting him from the front, I also have this same light acting as a backlight for the guy down here, and it works vice versa. So just kind of throwing these different things together, and that's only a 2-light setup, that cross lighting. It only takes 2 lights and gives kind of just a certain feel to it. So study films, just kind of watch over them, see how their lighting setup is, kind of maybe just take a moment in a scene that kind of catches your eye, pause it really quick, and then try to kind of break it down. Think about where they're placing their lights, what temperatures they're using, like what kind of colors they're using for their bulbs. Think about the intensities, if they're using diffusions, bounces, different things like that. Just kind of think about how their lighting setup might be put together, kind of try to visualize that in your head, and then maybe try to apply it to your own scene just so you can kind of get some more practice. So once again, practice is exploration and just kind of experimenting is like the best tool a filmmaker can have, especially when they're just starting out and just learning. Just do as much as you can, just mess around with as much as you can, experiment a lot, just kind of mess with it. Like don't set yourself to a norm right off from the start. Take your time to experiment and explore things, because there are limitless options out there for things that we can do within film. Like right now, this is a very basic setup that I'm shooting in right now, but there are so many different ways I can set this up. I can have my key light over there. I can have an extra fill light over here. I can have a bounce board. I can have more background light. There's all sorts of stuff you can be doing just to mess with this whole thing and create your own kind of different feel for it. I've kind of gotten the feel that I like for doing this type of stuff, but obviously it varies from person to person, and it all comes down to a matter of perspective. This is what I like. You may not like it. Other people might like it. Some people might just be kind of like, it's whatever. I don't really care. Obviously it's just one of those things where it's one of those subconscious psychological things that doesn't really get enough attention in some cases, and I think it deserves a little more, especially because half of the movie-going experience is what you're seeing on screen, and if your visuals aren't looking that great, well, then you're losing half of the movie, basically, is how I would put it. Audio is also very important, and be sure to, learn stuff on that too. I'll probably be covering an entire video over audio. I'll probably be doing several other videos. I'll have some sound design, some music, dialogue, all sorts of different things to work with. So be sure to keep an eye out for those in the future. But like I said, video is half of the movie-going experience. If you don't know how to work with it, you don't know how to produce it and make it look good, then you'll probably run into some issues. But anyways, guys, I think that's pretty much all I got for you today. So thank you so much for tuning into the video. Once again, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification for so you can stay updated for future uploads like this one, as well as some of our tech reviews and our very own short films. Check our social media sites so you can stay updated for whenever we upload a new video or we release a new blog post on our website. All links down in the description. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in today. I will see you all in the next video.